Well, joining us now for our TV showrunners panel is Liz Feldman for Dead to Me on Netflix. I am Marcus James Dixon, senior editor at Gold Derby. And Liz, you guys have announced that next season will be the last, and millions of fans are absolutely devastated because they just love this wonderful, wacky, emotional comedy. Is there anything we can do to change your mind?
Oh, let me, no. You know, it's a difficult decision, obviously, to end your own show, but I knew from the beginning, from the moment, I pitched the show, that it wasn't going to be a 5 or 6 season show. I knew that it needed to be a shorter run. And then, I'm definitely inspired by people like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who, made a really even bolder choice and only did a 2-season show, but those 2 seasons are fantastic. And I don't think anybody would say, that her show is, incomplete. So, it is a difficult decision, but given the sort of outsized stakes in the show and the sort of heightened realism, I thought, I knew that I could do one more season, and I came up with the ending while we were in the middle of shooting season 2. It just sort of came to me, and I just knew that it had to launch off of the finale of the second season, and so that's what it's going to be. And I'm sorry, but also I'm not.
Well, congrats on all the Emmy nominations this year. Best Comedy Series, Best Actress twice for Christina Applegate, Linda Cardellini. What was the whole virtual ceremony like from your perspective? Because of COVID, everyone was, I guess, in their own homes.
Well, listen, I've been dreaming of, that moment, that exact moment of being at the Emmys and, creating something that got me there. I've been dreaming of that my entire life, pretty much. So I would be lying if I said that it was, that it fulfilled all of my greatest dreams, because it was a little anticlimactic, but I think they did an incredible job of, doing the best version of the Emmys they could. But sure, it was like a little weird to be in my fellow executive producer's backyard, looking at like a camera as if that was the real thing. It was a little bizarre, but it was also, still kind of an incredible moment, and, something that I'll never forget for many reasons.
Well, on Dead to Me, the twists and turns, they never stop. It's almost like every episode tops itself, and my jaw just keeps dropping, farther and farther. Where did you get the idea to end every episode, or almost every episode, with a shocking cliffhanger?
Well, first, it was something that I knew would be very helpful on a streaming platform like Netflix. And, I know that when I'm watching a show and they drop some crazy reveal or introduce a whole new idea, it gets me to keep watching. And I sort of took it as a challenge. I'm a competitive person. I love playing games. And to me, it's like a big game. And if I can get you to keep sort of watching, then I feel like I'm winning. And it's also a great creative challenge to, have to tell a story that has all those twists and turns internally, but that ultimately ends on something that, you never saw coming and would have no idea what could possibly happen next. So it's sort of born out of, both sort of just the sense of wanting to make it irresistible to the audience, but also having it be as fun as possible for the writers in the room.
One of my favorite things about the show is that neither Jen nor Judy are necessarily heroes, but they're not villains either. They're just real people with real flaws, and I think that's what makes me want to have a glass of wine with both of them, even though they have criminal records at this point.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point, of the show in some ways, is that I'm exploring the good and bad in all of us, certainly in myself and also in the people that I love. How do we make sense of complicated relationships in our lives, and, and even honestly, like, sort of terrible people that you could so easily write off as just evil, or people who make terrible mistakes, and honestly, in our society, pay for it generally for the rest of their lives. And I've just found myself really interested in exploring that sort of gray area of morality, which is that, like, you can be a great person and make really terrible decisions that affect people for the rest of their lives.
James Marsden returned this season in a completely different role as Ben, the twin brother of Steve, who died last season. Was this always the plan to have twins, or did you just fall in love with James Marsden like the rest of the world did?
I mean, so no, it was not always the plan. We had signed James just for one season to play Steve, and obviously Steve met a pretty final end at the end of season 1. And then James actually wrote me an email about a week or so after the show premiered, and it seemed like a lot of people were watching, and the response was so lovely. And he said, "Why am I Googling if a guy can survive a traumatic brain injury and drowning?" And he expressed that he would love to still be a part of the show if that was somehow any possibility. And I had never considered it because, I thought we only had him for one season. So I immediately started thinking. I sat down with Kelly Hutchinson, who's another writer on the show and one of my best friends, and I told her about the email, and we just looked at each other at the same exact time. We were like, twins? And we started laughing because it's so preposterous. It's so, it's like, obviously, just, it's such a trope, and, ripped from a soap opera. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, like, what a fun challenge, that it would be for James, as an actor, but also for the writers to be able to carve out a totally new character from the same clay, and somebody that feels fully realized and totally unique, but also kind of an inverse of Steve. The sort of if Steve is the shadow side, Ben is the light side. And it just sort of fell into place so quickly in my mind who this guy could be, who he would be in the world, as we know it, and especially who he could be to Jen. So I pitched it to Marsden, maybe like 2 weeks after our initial that initial email, and he was in, and I'm so grateful. And I'm so happy that it worked out, because it was a bit of a swing, but I'm glad that we did it.
The season ends with this full circle moment of the stop sign fully being realized, and you think it's this great moment, and then it turns tragic immediately. And now Ben is involved in a hit and run, just like his brother the previous year. Can you talk about that scene, and without spoiling us, what it means for the future?
Well, we had come up with that end pretty early in the writer's room, and it felt right, because, again, in this exploration of good and bad, in this exploration of the gray area of not just morality, but also of any given day, that I felt that moment sort of expressed the tone of our show kind of perfectly. And it is a very specific tone, but to me, it is how I look at life, and on any given day, I mean, especially in the last 9 months, very tragic things happen, and things you would never imagine. And I mean, obviously we wrote this before the last 9 months, but, it's been resonating a lot with me that, life can be so many things at once, and that scene is our expression of that. You could be celebrating one moment, and the next moment, tragedy strikes, and it's just how things are sometimes. And so I don't want to give away too much, but obviously, we are setting up a season 3 where Ben just may have some secrets of his own.
How very Dead to Me of you. And last question, I just wanted to ask you what your favorite scene is in season 2. And while you think, I'll tell you mine. It was the scene in episode 4, I think, where they're at the bar and they're they're crying. They're literally bearing their souls to each other, and the guy comes over and starts hitting on them. It was really
And that is a perfect encapsulation of what it's like to be a woman. I mean, I have so many favorites. You know, one that I loved in terms of how it was executed was the final scene of episode 6, when Judy and Michelle make it back to Michelle's place, and you know they're in this sort of passionate moment, and they're finally hooking up, and it's this same thing that we've been talking about, where you're like on a bit of a joyride with them, and I Think We're Alone Now is playing, and their bedroom door shuts and the camera pulls back and the front door opens and in walks Perez, who we realize in that moment is Michelle's ex-girlfriend, but also the police officer who's looking for Steve. So, and what we did as the camera pulls back is slow down the song as if, time was like more, slowing down itself. And it just makes me happy every time I see it, because it's like a combination of so many different people on the show and their vision and their talent. But it just, like, the first time I saw it, I literally like pumped my fists in the air, because it's just one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, it works. But I think pretty much anytime Jen and Judy are in a scene together, it's just a joy. It's a joy to write, and it is a joy to watch them. It is like one of the greatest privileges of my life that I get to be on set and watch them, do every take. It's a masterclass.
awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Liz. We will see you very shortly.
Thank you.